I rowed at school from the age of 16 on the Coley Tyne, and out of a very primitive boathouse at Scotswood, where the head of the river, the Tyne head of the river, currently starts. And that was pretty rough because the river was filthy with coal dust. All the sewage at that time, this is 1950s we're talking about, went into the river. So it was a pretty tough place to learn to row, but actually that helped in the long term. Did I come up to St Andrews to row? The answer was absolutely not. I came up to St Andrews to fly. I hoped to join the University Air Squadron at Lucas, but unfortunately my eyesight was deemed to be not satisfactory, so that option went out of the window, although subsequently I came back to aviation as well, perhaps here later on. And I decided that I really wanted to form a rowing club despite the difficulties in doing so, many of which I didn't recognise initially. No electronic means of communication in those days, obviously telephones, but no mobiles and no internet, no emails, flyers and posters in the halls of residence and in the Students' Union. We had a mix of people. We had, at that time, the university in Dundee was part of the St Andrews University, so we had some people from Dundee who used to come over on a train. The Tay Bridge wasn't operational at that time, it wasn't built. Most of the people who rowed at that time, 1950s we're talking about, had been to public schools very well funded for rowing. The school that I was at was a grammar school, which was rather different, as I've explained. So they weren't used to getting up at godforsaken hours and going and finding the river full of mud because the tide was out. Never mind actually running for training along the West Sands when you couldn't row. I started with the harbour here at St Andrews, but clearly that's a very short area, and also it's subject to tides clearly, so that was not at all suitable. I then went to Dundee and had a look at the Tay estuary, just near where the airport now is, and that was very windswept, as the railway engineers had found out 100 years or more previously with the collapse of the Tay Bridge. So that was off the agenda. I then went, and when I talk about going, I'm going by train or bicycle, no cars in those days for students, not for me anyway. But I went to Cameron Reservoir, which is just down the road from here. Nice piece of water, but the fishermen and the environmental agency and the water board people were absolutely adamant that they weren't going to have the environment polluted by students, even with boats with oars. And I came back from Lucas one day, and it was a lovely day. Crossed over the bridge, the Eden Guard Bridge, and it was high tide, and it looked very peaceful, and I decided that was the place to start. Well, having seen the water was good, I then thought, well, how do we get access to that water? And clearly the Guard Bridge Paper Company at that time controlled all the land there. And I knocked on the door one day and asked them whether we could use the land, part of the boat, the land next to the river that they owned. And rather to my surprise, they said yes. I thought it was a bit of a crazy idea. And at that time, we didn't have a boat or any people, but we addressed those subsequently. So the Guard Bridge Paper Company was a very important factor in the initial stages. And it's interesting now that the university has taken over the whole of that site. So we were the pioneers, I think, in getting onto that site with our energetic activities. Joe Liddell was fundamental in getting us a boat. He gave us one of the old school boats, a clinker-built wooden four, which we were very pleased to have. It was all we had. So he gave us the boat. I subsequently discovered that the headmaster of the school had given him a bollocking because he'd disposed of school property without proper authorization, which I thought was quite ironic, really, given what we were going to do with the boat. But Archie Strachan was fundamental in getting the boat to St Andrews. He was very supportive of the foundation of the club, new sport for St Andrews. So he was keen on that, and he provided or made provision for the university lorry to take the boat from Lucas, well, from St Andrews goods yard into Guardbridge. We rode only on a Wednesday and at the weekend on a Saturday, because every student had Wednesday afternoon off at that time. I don't know whether they still do, but so that had to coincide, those two occasions had to coincide with the tide tides, obviously, otherwise you couldn't get out. Yeah. I mean, I read chemistry, as you know, and that involved 2 afternoons a week in the labs, and that was fairly typical of the sciences and the medical sciences. But, so you had lectures in the morning and you had practicals in the afternoons. So Wednesday was really the only time you had free, apart from the weekends. Generally at the weekends there was work to be done, even though there were no lectures. So it was quite tough. We probably trained about 2 days in addition to the rowing days. We used to run along the West Sands when the tide was out, and that was one of my biggest achievements, is actually getting the squad to run along the West Sands out to the end and back again. That was a real high for me, persuading rowers to run. It's always a challenge. You've got 16 ergos downstairs. Ergos weren't invented in the 60s at all. They just didn't exist in any shape or form. So you could do circuit training, and you could do running. That was about it, really. We did compete. We competed in Glasgow, in Edinburgh and Aberdeen, to a glorious lack of success. But in those days there were committee boats, so most regattas provided you with the boats, so we didn't have the problems of having to haul the boats, or we didn't have the kit to haul the boats. And we used to travel by train to Glasgow or Aberdeen or Edinburgh to attend those events. But bucks didn't exist.
Right.
I don't know whether it existed in other sports, but it certainly didn't exist in rowing.
It's quite new.
But, so you were basically competing in the local regattas, and if you were a real star, then you got to Henley. Plus ça change. And we also got support in talking events from the Scottish Amateur Rowing Association. Well, they were very supportive. A guy called George Hunter, who was the secretary there. I think he's died now.
Yeah.
But he got the OBE for services to rowing, and he was very supportive of our club, or the formation of the club, despite the fact that we annexed their colours on the blades, because you will have seen on the 1965 photograph that we had the saltire on the blade, which St Andrew Boat Club in Edinburgh had 100 years before us, but I didn't know that. I left St Andrews to go and do a PhD in Oxford. I rowed in Oxford for the college, not the university, I hasten to add. I'm about half the size required for that. But, so I rowed there, mostly sculling, but rowed in summer 8s on one occasion. I didn't have much to do with the organisation there at all, just turned up and was one of the galley slaves, you might say. But, however, when I went from there to Chester for a job, and also because they had good rowing there, but when I left Oxford, I looked at the map of the UK and plotted where the chemical industry was on the map, and also plotted where those good rowing rivers are, like the Thames, the Trent, and the Dee. I was lucky enough to get a job offer on the Dee side in Chester, and so I rowed there ever since. In terms of organisational skills, I'm the captain of one of the masters' crews at that club and have been for God knows how many years now. And a lot of the skills that I developed in St Andrews in terms of managing people and the micro-organisation were relevant and still are today. Like I'm sort of wondering about who's going to be in the crew for the head. and we're going to have to ditch a few people, and that's always painful. And I set up my own business, as you perhaps recall, called Catalyst Consultants. And a lot of the processes, management processes that I went through in doing that, really drew on the skills and experience I'd had in St Andrews and setting up a rowing club. So what I'm saying is that a lot of the skills that you can develop, life skills that you can develop in rowing, are applicable in many other domains. In fact, the older I get, the more I appreciate really how much I learned. I mean, I learned chemistry here and I got a degree, but that was nothing compared with the learning, the value of the learning that I got out of setting up and running the boat club. And our oldest members are in their 80s now, and I haven't yet achieved that.
Okay, but they're still trying though. Yeah.
They're still trying, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I started Master's I this year.
Yeah.
But, so it was a great experience coming here, and coming here since, and particularly the last time when we were doing the boat naming ceremony, it was just incredibly gratifying to see so many people participating in something which had started so small in my day.